There is a shadow fact that the headlines refuse to touch, a silent predator stalking the corridors of Bay Street and the suburban streets of the GTA. While the government points to a growing national GDP, they neglect the mathematical tragedy occurring at the individual level. Canada's GDP per capita is in a free fall. We are technically growing the pie by adding more people, but everyone's individual slice is shrinking, and it's shrinking fast. You feel it every morning when you check your bank balance before the first coffee is even brewed. It's that cold, hollow sensation in your chest that tells you the math no longer adds up. You did everything right. You got the degree, you landed the corporate job, and you contribute to your RRSP. Yet the goalposts aren't just moving. They are being hauled away by a truck you can't afford to fuel. This isn't just a rough patch or a cycle. This is a structural dismantling of the Canadian middle class. We are witnessing the birth of a two-tier society where the barrier to entry is no longer hard work, but existing assets. But why is the decline happening now? And what is the shadow fact that explains why your $100K salary feels like $40K? The answer lies in a place you visit every week, but never truly look at. Walk into any Loblaws or Sobeys across this country, and you'll see the first visceral sign of the slowdown. It's not just the price of a block of butter reaching $10. It's the psychological warfare of the grocery aisle. Notice the stickers, the yellow discount tags that offer pennies of relief on items that have doubled in price over 3 years. This is where the Canadian spirit is being broken. People are no longer shopping, they are auditing. They are standing in front of the meat counter, calculating the cost of a single chicken breast against the hours they spent at a desk. This is the Loblaws effect. When the basic fuel for human life becomes a luxury, discretionary spending dies. The local bistro, the independent clothing shop, the weekend getaway, these are the first casualties. When the middle class is forced to choose between protein and a night out, the velocity of money slows to a crawl. The economy is a machine that requires movement, but right now, every Canadian is hitting the brakes. The fear isn't just about the current price. It's the realization that these prices are the new floor, not the ceiling. If the grocery store is the heart of the economy, the pulse is getting weaker. But the real trap isn't in what you buy, it's in where you sleep. The Bank of Canada is trapped in a room with no exits, and you are in there with them. For years, we were told that low interest rates were a gift, a way to stimulate growth and keep the Canadian dream on life support. But that gift was a Trojan horse. Now, as the BOC struggles to balance inflation against a debt-laden populace, the interest rate trap has snapped shut. Every quarter-point move is a dagger to the heart of the Canadian household. We aren't just talking about higher monthly payments. We are talking about negative amortization, a term that should terrify every homeowner. It means your payments aren't even covering the interest anymore. Your debt is growing even as you pay it. This is the dark psychology of modern Canadian finance, the illusion of ownership. You don't own your home. You are merely renting it from the bank at an increasingly exorbitant rate. The psychological toll of knowing that your largest asset is actually a liability is what's draining the life out of the economy. As people divert every spare cent to keep the roof over their heads, the rest of the economy starves. But there's a deeper secret about the house poor phenomenon that most people are missing, and it involves the very land we stand on. The house poor reality in Canada has reached a terminal velocity. In cities like Vancouver and the GTA, the average mortgage payment now consumes over 60% of the median household income. This is not a sustainable economic model. It is a hostage situation. When such a massive portion of the population's wealth is tied up in non-productive real estate, the rest of the economy stagnates. We aren't innovating. We aren't building new industries. We are just trading the same houses back and forth for higher and higher prices, fueled by debt. This creates a wealth effect that is entirely fraudulent. You might feel rich because your bungalow is worth $2 million, but unless you plan on selling it and moving to a tent, that wealth is inaccessible. It's paper gold in a burning house. The emotional pain comes from the realization that the younger generation, the engineers, the nurses, the teachers, have been effectively priced out of their own future. They are looking at the border, wondering if the grass is greener in the south, while the ones who stayed are drowning in golden handcuffs. But the housing crisis isn't just about owning, it's the rental market that is providing the most terrifying sign of the slowdown. The rental market in Canada has become a battlefield. From Brampton to Burnaby, the stories are the same. 20 international students in a basement, or professional couples spending half their take-home pay on a one-bedroom condo. This is the rent trap. When rent consumes the majority of a young person's income, they cannot save for a down payment, they cannot invest in their TFSA, and they certainly cannot take risks on starting a business. The upward mobility that defined Canada for a century has been replaced by a static, feudal system. We are creating a generation of permanent renters who have no stake in the country's long-term success. The dark psychology here is the loss of hope. When you realize that no matter how hard you work, you will never get ahead, you stop trying. You settle for mediocrity. This is the hidden drag on our productivity. A workforce that sees no path to prosperity is a workforce that does the bare minimum. The economy isn't just slowing down because of interest rates. It's slowing down because the collective ambition of the nation is being crushed under the weight of monthly rent. And yet, the government continues to ignore the most glaring tax mistake that every middle-class Canadian is currently making. Canada has a productivity problem that is starting to look like a terminal illness. We are currently ranked at the bottom of the OECD for projected growth over the next decade. Why? Because we have stopped investing in things that actually create value. Instead of investing in technology, machinery, or research, Canadian capital is obsessed with residential real estate. We are a nation of landlords, not innovators. The productivity trap is the sign of an economy that has lost its way. When it's more profitable to flip a condo in North York than it is to build a tech startup, the future is already sold. This lack of productivity is why our wages are stagnant while the cost of living explodes. We are working longer hours than ever, yet our output per hour is falling behind our peers. It's a treadmill set to a speed we can no longer maintain. The visceral feeling of working 40+ hours and getting nowhere isn't a personal failure, it's a systemic one. You are running as fast as you can, but the treadmill is bolted to a floor that is sinking. But if the lack of productivity is the disease, the CRA is the doctor who keeps prescribing bloodletting. The CRA tax bite in Canada is becoming a source of quiet resentment that is reaching a boiling point. We are one of the most highly taxed populations in the world when you factor in income tax, sales tax, property tax, and the hidden carbon taxes that bake into the price of every loaf of bread. For the average middle-class Canadian, Tax Freedom Day, the day you stop working for the government and start working for yourself, isn't until June. Think about that. Half of your year is spent funding a system that many feel is failing them. The healthcare system is strained, the infrastructure is crumbling, and the bureaucracy is bloating. The emotional pain here is the lack of value for money. Canadians are generally happy to pay for social services, but when you wait 12 hours in an ER after paying 40% of your income in taxes, the social contract begins to fray. This tax fatigue is causing a silent exodus of our best and brightest. Why stay in Ontario and pay a 53% marginal rate when you can move to Texas or Florida and keep your hard-earned money? This brain drain is the ultimate sign of an economy in decline. But it's not just the high earners who are leaving, it's the very idea of the middle class that is vanishing. The Canadian middle class is no longer a demographic, it's a memory. We are witnessing the great bifurcation. On one side, you have the asset-rich, those who bought property 20 years ago and are sitting on millions in untaxed equity. On the other side, you have everyone else. The $100,000 salary, which used to be the hallmark of success, is now the bare minimum for survival in our major cities. This is the dark psychology of the new poor. These are people with professional titles and good jobs who are living paycheck to paycheck, terrified of an unexpected car repair or a dental bill. They are the invisible struggling. They don't qualify for government subsidies, but they can't afford the life they were promised. This erasure of the middle ground is what leads to social instability. When the path from working to comfortable is erased, people start looking for radical solutions. The economy is slowing because the very engine of consumption, the middle class, is being hollowed out. They have no discretionary income left to spend. The shadow fact is that the middle class isn't just shrinking, it's being liquidated to pay for the debt of the past, and the golden handcuffs of this debt are tighter than you think. The golden handcuffs of debt in Canada are not just about mortgages, they are about the line of credit lifestyle that has become the only way many families stay afloat. We have the highest household debt to GDP ratio in the G7. We are literally a nation built on a foundation of IOUs. The dark psychology here is the normalization of debt. We've been conditioned to think that carrying a balance on a credit card or a HELOC is just a part of being Canadian. But as interest rates stay higher for longer, those handcuffs are beginning to chafe. People are realizing that they don't own their cars, their furniture, or even their vacations. Everything is on a payment plan. When the economy slows, the first thing that disappears is the ability to service this debt. We are seeing a spike in consumer insolvencies that the mainstream media is barely covering. These aren't just irresponsible spenders. These are families who used debt to bridge the gap between their stagnant wages and the rising cost of living. They used debt to survive, and now that survival strategy is becoming their executioner. But the labor market, once the final bastion of hope, is starting to show cracks that no one expected. The Canadian labor market is undergoing a disturbing transformation. We are seeing a gigification of the workforce, where stable, full-time roles with benefits are being replaced by contract work and platform jobs. This is labor mismatch. We are bringing in hundreds of thousands of new residents to fill jobs, but those jobs often don't pay enough to cover the cost of living in the cities where the jobs exist. This creates a feedback loop of poverty. The emotional pain is felt by the new Canadian who is promised a dream and found a nightmare of 3 part-time jobs and a shared bedroom. It's also felt by the domestic worker who sees their wages suppressed by an endless supply of low-cost labor. The economy is slowing because the quality of our jobs is declining. We are becoming a service economy that serves itself, with no real value-added exports. When everyone is an Uber driver or a skip-the-dishes courier, who is left to build the things that actually matter? The shadow fact here is that our low unemployment rate is a mask for a high underemployment rate. People are working, but they aren't earning. This leads us to the retail apocalypse happening in our suburbs. Walk through any suburban plaza in Ontario or BC, and you'll see the retail apocalypse in real time. It's the for lease signs that stay up for months, the empty parking lots of once thriving malls, and the closure of local staples. Small businesses are the backbone of the Canadian economy, and they are being crushed between rising commercial rents and a consumer base that has no money left. The dark psychology of the death of the local is the loss of community. When the local coffee shop closes and is replaced by a global chain, or worse, nothing at all, the social fabric of the neighborhood begins to tear. This is a sign of an economy that is no longer circulating. Money is being extracted from communities by large corporations and landlords and being sent to offshore accounts or institutional investors. The slowdown is visible in the quiet streets of our business districts. People are staying home, not because they want to, but because they have to. The doom spending phase is over, and the austerity phase has begun. But what happens when even your savings aren't safe from the slowdown? The savings drain is the most terrifying silent sign of the slowdown. For decades, Canadians were told that the TFSA and RRSP were their tickets to a comfortable retirement. But in 2024, we are seeing a record number of hardship withdrawals. People are raiding their future to pay for their present. This is the ultimate red flag. When people start burning the furniture to keep the house warm, you know the winter is going to be long. The dark psychology here is the robbing of future self. Every dollar taken out of an RRSP today to pay for a mortgage renewal is a dollar that won't be there when you're 75 and can no longer work. We are creating a future crisis of elderly poverty that will dwarf our current problems. The government loves to talk about the resilience of the Canadian consumer, but raiding your retirement fund isn't resilience, it's desperation. The slowdown is manifesting as a permanent loss of future wealth. We are becoming a nation that lives for Tuesday because we can't afford to think about 10 years from now. This desperation is even beginning to infect our healthcare system. The link between the economy and healthcare in Canada has never been more strained. A slowing economy means less tax revenue, which means a healthcare system that is already on life support gets even fewer resources. But there's a darker psychological angle. The stress of scarcity is making Canadians sicker. The mental health crisis in this country is directly tied to the economic reality. When you are constantly worried about rent, groceries, and debt, your body stays in a state of high cortisol. This leads to burnout, chronic illness, and a further drain on the system. The shadow fact here is that our economic slowdown is a public health emergency. We are seeing longer wait times for everything from family doctors to life-saving surgeries, and the wealthy are starting to opt out, seeking private care in the US or abroad. This creates a two-tier health system by default. If you're poor in a slowing economy, you're not just broke, you're at risk. The visceral pain of waiting months for a scan while your condition worsens is the ultimate sign of a failing state. And this failure is driving our best talent across the border. The brain drain to the United States is no longer a trickle, it's a flood. Canada's brightest engineers, doctors, and entrepreneurs are looking at the math and realizing it doesn't add up. Why stay in a country where a two-bedroom condo costs $1 million and taxes take half your check, when you can move to Austin, Raleigh, or Nashville, double your salary, and buy a mansion for half the price? This is the export of excellence. We are subsidizing the education of our youth through our taxes, only to have them take that value and give it to the American economy. This is a catastrophic loss of human capital. The dark psychology here is the feeling of betrayal. These are people who love Canada, who want to stay near their families, but feel they are being economically evicted. When a country loses its most productive people, its economy doesn't just slow down, it rots from the inside out. We are left with a shrinking tax base and an aging population. But the layoffs aren't just happening to those who leave, they are happening quietly to those who stay. The quiet layoffs are the new corporate trend in Canada. Unlike the massive headline-grabbing cuts of the past, these are subtle. A hiring freeze here, a restructuring there, or simply not replacing people who leave. It's a slow-motion thinning of the white-collar workforce. Companies are bracing for a prolonged downturn and are cutting costs by stealth. The dark psychology of this is the survivor guilt and constant fear felt by those who remain. You're doing the work of 3 people, but you're too afraid to ask for a raise because you know 10 people are waiting for your job. This environment kills creativity and risk-taking. The economy slows because no one is willing to rock the boat. We are seeing this in the tech hubs of Toronto and Vancouver, where the growth at all costs era has been replaced by survival at all costs. The shadow fact is that the unemployment rate doesn't account for the zombie employees, those who are technically employed but have no job security and no future prospects. This leads to a massive mountain of credit card debt. The credit card debt mountain in Canada has reached a height that should trigger every alarm bell in Ottawa. We are seeing balances grow at the fastest rate in years, and more importantly, the payment-to-balance ratio is falling. People are making the minimum payments just to keep the lights on. This is the debt spiral. When you use credit to buy groceries, you aren't just paying for food. You're paying for food plus 22% interest. This is the dark psychology of predatory survival. The banks know that the Canadian consumer is cornered, and they are reaping record interest income while the average family drowns. The emotional pain is the 3 a.m. panic. The moment you realize that even if you stopped spending today, it would take you 30 years to pay off what you already owe. This debt mountain is a drag on future growth because every dollar earned tomorrow is already spent today. The economy is slowing because we have borrowed from the future for so long that the future has finally arrived and it wants its money back. But there is a massive divide in who is suffering. The boomer wealth gap is the elephant in the room of the Canadian economy. We have a generation that benefited from the greatest economic expansion in history, sitting on trillions in real estate equity, while their children and grandchildren struggle to buy eggs. This creates a bank of mom and dad economy. Success in Canada is no longer about what you know, but who your parents are. This is the death of meritocracy. The dark psychology here is the resentment at the dinner table. It's the awkward silence when parents talk about their Florida vacation, while their adult children are living in a basement. This wealth gap is a sign of an economy that is no longer regenerating. Instead of wealth flowing through the system through productivity, it is trapped in the hands of the elderly, only to be released upon their death. We are waiting for an inheritance to start our lives. This waiting room economy is stagnant, boring, and fundamentally broken. It's the ghost of 2008, but this time, the haunting is much more personal. Many economists are comparing our current situation to the 2008 financial crisis, but they are wrong. 2008 was a heart attack. What we are experiencing now is a slow-moving autoimmune disease. In 2008, the world crashed and recovered. In Canada today, we are simply fading away. The ghost of 2008 haunts our policymakers, making them terrified of a housing correction, so they do everything to keep prices high, which only makes the underlying sickness worse. The dark psychology is the illusion of safety. We think because we didn't have a subprime crisis in 2008, our banks are invincible. But our subprime is our entire middle class. We have high-quality borrowers who are being turned into low-quality borrowers by the cost of living. The shadow fact is that the Canadian banking system is more exposed to a consumer collapse than almost any other developed nation. We are a house of cards built on a foundation of safe mortgages that are anything but safe in a high-interest, low-growth environment. And you can see this in the luxury illusion that is finally starting to shatter. The luxury illusion is the final stage of an economic slowdown. For the last few years, you still saw BMWs and Teslas in the driveways of the suburbs, but look closer. Many of those are leased, and the for sale signs for luxury goods are starting to flood Facebook Marketplace. The flex culture is dying because nobody can afford the payments. The dark psychology of keeping up with the Joneses has been replaced by hiding from the creditors. We are seeing a massive correction in the secondary markets, the cottages in Muskoka, the luxury condos in Kelowna. These are the first things to go when the money dries up. The visceral pain is the loss of status. Canadians have tied their identity to their home value and their lifestyle, and as both are squeezed, the national ego is taking a hit. We are realizing we aren't as rich as we thought we were. We were just highly leveraged. This realization is leading to a massive regional divide that is threatening the very unity of the country. The regional divide in Canada is a ticking time bomb. Alberta is decoupling from the struggles of Ontario and Quebec, leading to an internal migration that is changing the face of the country. People are fleeing the high costs of the GTA for the relative affordability of Calgary and Edmonton. But this escape to the west is creating its own problems, driving up prices in previously affordable cities. The dark psychology here is the balkanization of opportunity. Depending on which province you live in, you are experiencing a completely different version of reality. This prevents a national solution to our economic problems, because what helps the oil sands hurts the manufacturing sector in Ontario, and vice versa. The economy is slowing because we are no longer a single market. We are a collection of struggling regions competing for a shrinking pie. The shadow fact is that Canada is becoming harder to govern as the economic pain becomes more localized. But the final warning signs are now impossible to ignore, and they are coming from the most unexpected place. The final warning signs of the slowdown are the quiet streets. Look at the commercial centers of our cities at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. The foot traffic is gone. The energy is gone. This is the velocity of money reaching zero. When people stop moving, stop buying, and stop dreaming, the economy doesn't just slow, it stops. The visceral feeling is one of stagnation. It's the sense that the best days of Canada are in the rearview mirror. The curiosity gap we started with, the shadow fact, is that this isn't a glitch. It's the design of a system that prioritized debt over production. We are now paying the interest on the ego of the last 20 years. The black swan event isn't coming, it's already here. It's the cumulative weight of 1,000 small failures, a grocery bill, a tax hike, a mortgage renewal. The question is no longer when the slowdown will happen. The question is, how long can you survive it? Because the survival shift is the only way forward, and it requires a complete rethinking of what it means to be successful in Canada. The survival shift is the new Canadian reality. To thrive in this slowing economy, you have to abandon the old playbook. The degree, the house, the 9-to-5, these are no longer guarantees of safety. The dark psychology of the future is radical self-reliance. You need to look at your TFSA and RSRP not as retirement funds, but as freedom funds. You need to diversify away from the Canadian dollar and the Canadian housing market. The visceral pain of the last decade has been a teacher, showing us that the system isn't coming to save us. The slowdown is a filter, separating those who wait for a government handout from those who take control of their own financial destiny. This is the end of the Canadian dream as we knew it, but it's the beginning of a more resilient, more awake population. The shadow fact is that while the economy is slowing down, your personal growth doesn't have to. The question is, will you be a victim of the slowdown, or will you be the one who saw it